I'm Rory Greener from XR Today, bringing you the latest in news and conversation from the extended reality space. Today, we'll be discussing the use of XR in creating unforgettable commercial experiences. And joining me today to explore that topic is Michael Guerin, the Principal CEO of Imvizar. Thank you, and cheers for taking the time for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Rory.
Brilliant. So just to start us off and to introduce our readers to what you do, can you define an Imivzar-brand AR commercial experience? And within that, what do you uniquely offer to your commercial clients?
Okay, so we create spatial storytelling experiences that are typically location-based, or at times we call them location-specific. So in practice, we work with tourist attractions, cities, global tech companies, animated studios, and they all tend to have one thing in common, that they want to use typically augmented reality to tell their story. So they tend to want to engage, be it their fans or their visitors or their staff or whatever the audience is, they want to engage them using augmented reality with a location-based experience. So if I give you some examples, we work with a tourist attraction in Ireland, which is called Spike Island. It's the equivalent of Ireland's Alcatraz. It was a prison and a military base off the coast of Southern Ireland, off Cork, for the last 500-600 years. Biggest prison in the world at a point in time. If you went to there 2 years ago, you have done an audio tour. Now, when you go there, you do an augmented reality storytelling experience. So there's 15 different stops throughout the site itself. So if you go into the punishment block, you see a prisoner chained to the wall with a blindfold on, and he explains to you what life was like in those conditions. If you go into the children's prison, you meet the 50 little boys that lived there, and one character in particular, a little boy called Timmy, and you see in life size what the beds were like, what the structure within the room was like. And then we've also created a full 30 by 30 square meter recreation of a monastery site, which obviously no longer exists, from around 600 AD. So there's a whole variation of experiences in Spike Island, but typically they're all life size and location based. So you can only unlock them if you're in that room, if you're at that door, or if you're on that exact location. And then they're all mapped to the location, so they have a lot of accuracy, so that it makes it a more believable story. So typically we can work with things like that. Other things we've experiences in the cities in Portugal. We just launched a new experience, two experiences actually, in Sydney in Australia. They're mostly focused on tourism, and then we have some new experiences to launch now, which will be like digital story trails within buildings to engage visitors within buildings, and then also a companion app for a new kids TV animated series.
Fantastic. And just moving away now from the end user stuff, could we talk about some of the people creating that AR content? What does the wider Imvizar streaming ecosystem provide for those AR content developers, as well as those designing those experiences for your clients and for the ecosystem itself?
Yeah, so I suppose there's three components to Imvizar as a company. So the first is that we have our own studio, so we create our own experiences, and we've created experiences in 6 different countries now. And we like to call them, using a Netflix analogy, I'll use a Netflix analogy to explain a bit of this, but it's like Imvizar Originals. We then have the platform which hosts experiences all around the world. So there's over 60 stories at the minute in 7 countries. And we like that's like a bit like Netflix, the platform. So we create our own content, and there's also a platform. The third and probably most interesting component for content developers and content creators is a new tool which we will launch the beta version of in about 4 weeks, called Stage Reality. So it's a tool to enable anybody to create life-size, location-specific storytelling experiences for AR without having any prior coding or design experience. So typically, if you want to create a truly engaging and very accurately placed life-size scene at the minute, you'll probably need to use Unity to get to the point where you know how to use Unity enough to develop something that's of a commercial level. You're probably going to want to be working in Unity for a few years. We're creating this tool to enable anybody that in less than a day will be able to create a really a really engaging life-size AR experience. So it'll be a desktop and tablet and mobile-based application. So you'll be able to edit the experiences while you're sitting at your desk. You'll also on-site using AR be able to create the scene and move objects around and save that as a storytelling experience. So if you wanted to, as an example, Rory, if you were a creator and wanted to create a story for the Berlin Wall, you could go to the Berlin Wall, pick a location you want to do it, bring in the assets from any number of the places you can get assets now, create that story, and then publish that on the Imvizar app and other locations. So our contribution to the wider content creation ecosystem was, I suppose, strong with the platform to enable others. And we've a content studio working with in Greece at the minute here, onboarding a number of their experiences. But really, we want to widen the ecosystem, not just people who know how to use Unity. We want to enable it for storytellers across the world who don't know how to use Unity, or maybe don't even know how to code at all.
Fantastic. And, just to add to that, it sounds like you're really focusing on not just the growth, but then also the accessibility and flexibility to bring people to use these tools. Is that correct in saying that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we have the privilege of having a number of Unity developers on the team. It took quite a long time to get there. Some of them have gaming experience, some of them have VR experience, some of them have AR experience. But really, I expect these types of immersive storytelling experiences and spatial storytelling experiences to get much more prevalent in the next 3 to 5 years. If we want to get there, we've got to make it easier for people to create it. So a bit like, the world of graphic design was largely consumed by the Adobe Creative Cloud and the Adobe Suite. Canva came along, and there's a whole lot of people who can create really nice designs without needing any prior training on how Adobe works, and they can do it in a very quick time. So we would expect to create a tool that's just as simple to use.
Brilliant. And then moving over now to the customers using or partaking in those immersive experiences. Could you perhaps, not just in terms of Imvizar's brand of AR, but then also the wider AR technology, how is it a transformative solution for customer retention, and how does it really keep consumers engaged in a way, or not just consumers, perhaps visitors to a location? How does it keep them engaged and keep their retention levels high while using AR opposed to more traditional pen and paper or even more traditional digital methods?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really good question, and I think it's really important that it's only used when it's required. So I think. I think we've seen loads of examples of AR, VR, XR being used in scenarios where it probably doesn't really need to be used. It doesn't really add much value. So like in terms of customer retention, you would possibly be hard pushed to find examples of AR that's good for customer retention, maybe good for other things. So probably some of the most popular use cases of AR to date have been like mostly marketing experiences. So there's loads of web AR experiences that tend to be focused on marketing. They're almost all funded by brands, and it tends to be you scan a wine bottle or you scan a poster or a cereal box, and then a little character pops out on the table in front of you. Most of those tend to be like sub 10-second experiences. They don't really tend to focus on the experience itself. They're more focused on social sharing. So all of them encourage you to have something that's relatively gimmicky for less than 10 seconds because you think it's fun, and then you share it on social media, which is that's the goal of marketing, to get more people to have eyes on the product. So that makes sense. In terms of customer retention, or AR as a retention tool there, it's a very good marketing tool, very good engagement tool, and good for social sharing. Other more popular ones have been the likes of different games. Pokemon Go is obviously talked about a lot, but I suppose the reality of Pokemon Go is that it's a location-based game that has AR rather than really being an AR game. It's the location-based element, and the community element is probably more important there than the AR. So the retention, I think, probably comes from the community and the gamification, maybe rather than the AR. And then we also have things like education and retail, IKEA being a particularly impactful one. I think it's a really so if we go back to what I was saying at the start, I think it's really important that you only use AR where it really adds value. And I think the IKEA app is a prime example of AR adding value. People want to know, does that sofa or table fit into this room, and what will it look like? very simple user interface. You search the object you want to place in the room, you place it in the room in front of you, and then you can see exactly. I actually used it just yesterday in our office to decide what table we're going to put in the office. So I think it's a really simple use case. So, in terms of customer, like for us, because we tend to do storytelling experiences, it's a bit like creating a movie. Most people creating movies don't create a movie so that 1,000 people watch it 1,000 times. They want 1,000,000 people to watch it once, type of thing. So we're not necessarily in the retention or repeat business. We're more about increasing satisfaction and increasing engagement at the time. So whether that's a visitor to a building, or a tourist at an attraction, or a fan of a TV show that has a complimentary AR experience, we're more about engaging the satisfaction there. So for us, it's just really important. If you're using AR, it definitely has to add value. There's loads of things you can do with audio and with text and with images and with videos. We've also learned the hard way, Rory. We have built experiences in the last 2 years that we built it, thought it looked great on paper, launched it in AR, and then realized this actually could just be an audio experience because the AR isn't adding much value here, which has encouraged us to change how we scope experiences. So if there's zero benefit in having a monologue of 3 to 4 minutes of a character telling you about a historical location. Again, fun for about 10 seconds because you see the character in front of you, but then you're just holding your phone up listening to something that you could just listen to in audio. So you've really got to make sure that you're enhancing the experience with something visual, and it's got to be something that video can't provide as well. So I think if you can get all those points, like we're soon to launch a toolkit and a guide which will hopefully help people understand the parameters of how to create a spatial story. And probably one of the most important things is scoping the location, understanding the location, then understanding the user movement and where you want the user to go and what you want them to look at. And the very last thing that you do when you're building a spatial story is add the script. So typically the script comes much, much earlier normally in a production of any type of media, but we actually add this script and the narrative at the very end. So it's all about location, where the user is, what the user is facing, what interaction the user will have with characters and objects, and how will this become a spatial story that they will move around, because then the AR is adding value,
Brilliant, really insightful there, really, really honest. I'd love to learn a little bit more. You've discussed some of the branded content you've put out, but perhaps within that journey, what has been some of the stronger vertical markets, and what have been some particular markets that you have seen, not just Imivzar, excuse me, branded content, but as well as just generally AR immersive storytelling? What are the most successful vertical markets that you found this?
So we started in tourism, and we started there because we are building immersive storytelling experiences. And in tourism, and typically it's historical tourism and heritage sites and culture and heritage, there's a story to be told. So and when you go to any historical site around the world, they tell you stories. So it was really about how can we tell those stories better in a more immersive and engaging way. That was the obvious place to start. Since then, we have started working with in a number of different verticals. We're working in education with a US university to build experiences with their Department of Physics to teach different concepts within physics in an immersive way. So the research that they have done is suggests that if you sit back and listen to somebody telling you something, you will learn it, a certain amount. If you then engage with the content, you learn it a lot more. But the research that they've done, which is the reason that they have this project, is if you physically engage with the content, as in you walk or you move rather than just sit and interact with it on a screen or something, you're more likely to remember it again. So we're teaching different things like electromagnetism and others through AR to try and determine, this is not yet proven, but to try and determine and understand if augmented reality adds value in that scenario. Then we've also worked, we're moving now into employee engagement and visitor engagement in different buildings. So not necessarily from a historical standpoint, but just like storytelling and to be honest, kind of entertainment, and that's within a building. And then we're also working in the entertainment space. So with typically broadcast media who may have a kids TV series, or even not necessarily a kids TV series. It could be an adults TV series that, or a movie that there's additional content. So the main reason we're doing that. Typically, what everybody is striving for anywhere is that your show becomes, the show with the most amount of fans. So the highest level of fandom tends to be that um, you binge watch the show. Probably you then might buy merchandise, you might follow them on social media, and then that's kind of as far as you can go. Some others have taken it a little bit further. So sometimes a community forms around a show or a piece of content. Pokemon Go is a prime example of that. There's a community of hundreds of millions of people who now regularly engage with that franchise because there's something for them to do. And I think they're all, like nearly every brand, be it a media brand or others, are striving to get to that level of community beyond social media community. So we're working with them to create experiences that people can do by themselves and engage with content related to what they've seen on screen, but then also become part of a wider community. So there may be leaderboards, there may be different ways for you to engage. There may then be follow-up events that, one day, one weekend per quarter, you all go to different locations and cities, and then there's games and missions that are released on that day. So for us, we're definitely started with tourism because there were stories to tell, but we've realized that there are stories to tell in multiple different industries. We've just got to make sure that we don't try and do too much, and we deliver on all the bits that we need to. But look, I think as you well know, there's been loads of announcements in the XR space in the last 2 years. Even this year, a fairly significant one. I think it will always be a rocky journey over the next couple of years, but I think there's a huge amount of potential in creating like truly engaging content beyond the kind of 10-second marketing, relatively gimmicky things. I think people will really move towards experiences. So
fantastic, and there's a lot to dissect there, really. And a couple of points specifically is the idea of AR in a real location, and then that idea of community that you're building up to. AR really seems to be quite a strong post for the XR industry as a whole, I think, because of that ability to bring people together in a real place where you're not just creating a alternative, you're creating something that can enhance pre-existing industries, locations, and sensibilities. Could you perhaps just quickly dissect a little bit more into that idea of leveraging AR as well as XR generally, I suppose, to enhance real-world customer experiences and interactions? That the idea of interacting with your peers in a location, perhaps over digital content shared across a device, over purely digital routes, say like Roblox, even just buying something on Amazon on a 2D screen. What value does that add to people in person gatherings?
So, I think it has the potential to add a huge amount of value to people. I think, look, we're focused on AR more specifically because we believe in bringing people to locations and then getting them to have shared experiences while they're there. And I think there is obviously a world with loads of different companies that have, there are virtual worlds. There are lots of people creating virtual worlds, creating headsets for it, and there is a huge amount of people that will enjoy that. For us, we're definitely focused on how you can enhance the real world around you with digital content. So whether that's in a, there's some really great companies doing that in a retail space that can, guide you around a retail space and tell you, even have suggested. So at the minute, if you go online and you buy a jumper, it might say it goes with this, and this. You can start to do that in a retail space as well. It can guide you around the shop and give you suggestions. So I think that's happening again for us. Like, we're really focused on the storytelling element, and I feel that people can be really entertained, to be honest with you, by AR. I think it can go beyond the relatively gimmicky experiences that we have if we have a suitable level of interactivity and experience. If we have experiences that understand the location they're in and understand the context they're in. But I suppose the reason I think this hasn't happened to date maybe is because of the limitations of technology. So all the examples I spoke about earlier in terms of the relatively small, relatively gimmicky marketing experiences for social sharing, they've been super successful for what they set out to achieve. But the reason that we haven't been able to do the big life-size experiences with things all around you, and you really feel like you're immersed either with a headset or with some kind of hard-worn device, or just on a mobile device, is because of the technology limitations. So we'll, connectivity will, has been an issue because it means you've got to download small experiences, so it's a very simple experience. There hasn't been enough processing power in devices, so again, it's been very simple in terms of what you can render on the device. And then positioning technology has been a massive barrier. So if the device doesn't understand the world around you, there's a table in front of me here, and there's a chair here, and there's a wall behind me. If the device doesn't understand that, then the content and the whole engagement is jarring for the mind, and then you don't connect to the content. So whether you're trying to do something in retail, or you're trying to do something in marketing or education or whatever it might be, like if you're doing it in retail and there's a line of a path for you to follow to get to the jumper that they're recommending you, and that line is through a wall, that doesn't make sense to a human. So if you can't position the content you're putting in AR, then it doesn't really make sense. So we focus quite heavily on looking what's happening in the construction industry and other places on how accurately you can place objects. And in our context, if you can really accurately place objects, you can get to a point where the stories become really believable. So you can start to feel like the character's really there. So like we did a demo recently at a show in London, where at our stand we had a chair, and we have an experience in the south west of Ireland where Queen Victoria visited in 1860. So we used that character, and then we had Queen Victoria appear in the experience, and then she went and sat on the chair in the room. So for users, or for people watching the experience, they find it really believable, not in this obviously isn't happening, but believable in the sense that the character really interacted with a real world object. Now obviously they didn't really, because it was pre-scanned and whatever it might be, but the Queen still went and sat on the chair. So that story becomes way more exciting and engaging for the user. And if you can add interactivity and a good narrative into that, and again, not make it too long, then you can get to a point where you have really good experiences that utilize the real world around you. And I think AR has massive potential to do that, but I think we've massive strides to get to a point of the devices understanding the real world, so the content can be placed relative to it, and then it becomes more engaging and believable.
Fantastic, and the geolocation stuff is incredibly important, and there's so many strides being made in it. It's a massively emerging technology in its own right. But just to follow on from that, and just to wrap up, I wanted to gather your thoughts on the future of some of the integrated streaming technology that is required for delivering some of these high quality AR branded content, and whether that be 5G or perhaps the networking in smartphones or HMDs. What does that future of networking and streaming look like in your opinion, and what's maybe required to secure those big, larger scale AR branded content that you're talking about?
Yeah, look, I think we're going to have super low latency connectivity, and whether that's 5G and whether 5G will ever deliver that, or whether we'll have to wait till 6G, I'm not entirely sure. But ultimately, what we need is ultra low latency connectivity, and then we'll probably need a lot of processing and rendering on the edge. So, especially if we want head-worn devices, so people want a head-worn device that is as slick as a pair of Ray-Bans, but you can't do that if you've got to do all the processing up here, and then you need all the battery power up here, and you need everything else. Like, there's only so small we can make these things in the next few years. So we're going to have to move a lot of that to the edge if we can, which means, it's, in an example of some of the experiences I've talked about, like our Spike Island one, or ones in Waterford City or Kerry, or even in Sydney, if we have that content being processed and rendered on the edge and then streamed over device, in theory, or streamed over 5G, in theory, you don't need memory on the device. You just need the right, you need the right power in the device to be able to place those objects in the world around you. And I think that's where we need to get to. Like we really limit the quality even of our experiences at the minute, in terms of file size limit and texture limit and all types of things, to try and make it work for the majority of devices. So, we talked at the start of this call, Rory, about creating commercial experiences. If it's commercial, it's got to work for the majority of people, which means it's probably got to work on an iPhone 8 on pretty crap 4G technology or pretty crap Wi-Fi. So if you're building, there's definitely a split between something that's super commercial and ready for the majority of the world versus something that's high end. But I think what we'll probably end up getting to, and look, we're working on this on our own platform, Netflix have a number of different options. You can stream movies on Netflix. You can also do an SD version and a HD version and possibly even an Ultra HD version. I've no doubt we'll get to that with XR, where if you have a very basic phone, you can do an SD version. If you have the brand new whatever head-worn device, you may get to a point where you're doing the Ultra HD version, and then we'll need to get the connectivity sorted with that. But my background actually before setting up Imvizar was leading the 5G programs for Dublin City in Ireland for 3 to 4 years. So the reason I've come into this at this time is because I actually think connectivity is getting to the point where it's almost ready. So that's I've worked with a lot of different cities on connectivity. I've worked with a lot of large technology organizations deploying the right connectivity in cities. So look, I'll not bore you with the details, but there's loads of challenges in getting this level of low latency, probably millimeter wave technology into cities. But there's also, it's funny, I'm now on the other side in the sense that there wasn't a push to do it because there was no use cases, and a lot of the use cases they spoke about weren't really suitable actually for that type of connectivity. But actually, some of the AR ones that we're talking about, or even VR ones, but certainly AR ones in cities, would be really good use cases for the 5G that is possible in the next couple of years. So I think there's loads of great companies working on it. I think we're getting there, but I think we're going to have to really start thinking about how we do more on the edge to relieve the pressure on the device and the capabilities of the device. So I hope and expect to get there in the next maybe 3 to 5 years.
Brilliant, incredibly insightful. Thank you for that. That must be a very unique perspective to have. But cheers so much for jumping on, Michael. It's been a brilliant chat. For those watching, could you just tell our viewers or our listeners where they can learn more about Imvizar and everything you're doing?
Yeah, so imvizar.com, so imvizar.com. So you'll find the website there. There'll be a new website in the next 3 or 4 weeks, so maybe look then if you want. You find us on our website, also on social channels, and then you can find me on LinkedIn. If anybody has any questions about anything that I've discussed today, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect and have a chat.
Fantastic. That's it from myself. Get more XR news by subscribing to the XR Today news channel and by following our social pages. I've been Rory Greener from XR Today. Thank you very much for watching.